Hey everyone, welcome back to Metal Shop Steve. I, of course, am Steve. Today we have some exciting stuff going on. This is a brand new segment. Very first time. I like to call it my Fast Five. So basically what we're going to do in the Fast Five segment each time is to pick a band, and we are going to select 5 albums from that band's career and talk about them. Talk about the progression, talk about all that good stuff. Today we are starting off very first ever Fast Five with Metallica. This is a band that I listened to growing up. Even in my young days, I was rocking the Metallica. So here we go. Again, I have some trusty notes here just because there's so much music and so much to think about with a Fast Five. First album, Kill 'Em All. You can see my copy is well worn, well played. First Metallica album. Now, at the very start, they had probably most of you know, Dave Mustaine, who went on to found and is still rocking Megadeth these days. But he was in on the early days of Metallica, did some songwriting, did some guitar work, things like that. Things did not work out friendly between the band and Dave Mustaine. So he was kicked to the curb, no longer with the band, although I'm sure he's happy with how his career has progressed as well. Also of note, another kind of band change, this one a little more tragic, Cliff Burton, the original bass player for Metallica, who died. We'll talk about that in a minute. Actually, we'll talk about it now. He died in a tour bus accident and was later replaced by Jason Newsted. But for the first 3 albums, you have Cliff Burton on bass, and the rest of the band, as we're rounding it out, kind of early days. I'm actually going to show you a couple of pictures close up because there's some great pictures of these guys from their younger days. James Hetfield, of course, guitar and singing. Of course, Lars on drums. And great picture of Lars here too. Kirk Hammett rounds it out on guitar as well. So that's the band. Those are the stories. Kill 'Em All. Just a great opening album for these guys. So young. And again, look at the pictures. Listen to the voice. James Hetfield's voice is so young in this. Might even sound younger than what his picture looks here. But they are a thrash band, no denying it. They're known as one of the 4 horsemen, the 4 big thrash bands out there to start everything off. And again, you pop this in, right away you know you're listening to a thrash CD, no doubt about it at all. It's a very raw album, as you might imagine, somebody's first album. And this one actually came out in 1983, so again, they're young, it's the early days, and very raw. It's so aggressive, it's so fast, it's so loud. To tell you just about some of the songs that really grabbed me, I can tell you that, so I guess I'll give them to you in order of my top 3 songs on the album. Number 1, Whiplash. I love Whiplash. It's fast, it's strong, it's brutal. And for me, it's the best song on the album. Followed pretty closely by the 4 Horsemen. I really like that one as well. It's a different kind of song, as much variety as you can get between pretty much what is a whole album full of thrash songs. 4 Horsemen, number 2. Number 3 actually came at the end of this album, and it's not on some of the original release albums here. I really love a track called Am I Evil? There's some nice tempo change in there. Really kind of churning, chugging song. I like it a lot. But again, some album versions do not have that song. If you know about that, just drop me a line here below and tell me. But again, I really like that one. Otherwise, Phantom Lord, No Remorse, these are all great songs here on Kill 'Em All. So a really solid first album effort for Metallica here. What I can say is there are glimpses of what they're going to sound like in the future through this album, and in my opinion, it just gets better from here. So, with that said, we're not going to waste a lot of time since this is supposed to be a Fast Five. I'm going to give you a Fast Five. Moving on, chronologically, 1984, Ride the Lightning. Again, a great follow-up to the original, and as you hope most bands are going to do as they progress, especially from first album to the second album, is you hope that they are going to mature, get better. I mean, why not get better? We're not talking about changing the sound necessarily. We're just talking about getting better musically, vocally, lyrically, instrumentally, all that good stuff. And I think they do. Again, they're maturing, their musical phrasing, their lyrics are getting a little bit better. And for me, this album is one that actually gets better as it goes along. So I'm not saying that the first couple tracks are weak. I'm by no means saying that. But for me, this is one that you kind of ease into, you kind of roll into as much as you can ease into a thrash album anyway. So that's Ride the Lightning. And again, here I'm going to give you my favorite songs, top three. Number one, Creeping Death. Again, this has a absolutely brutal killer riff. I love Creeping Death. Top song on the album for me. Number two, For Whom the Bell Tolls. I really like that. And finally, number three, Fade to Black. Probably, I don't know. I'd have to say that that might be the most well-known song from the album, Fade to Black. And for good reason. It's really good. What Metallica has started to do here with the second album, you didn't see it as much on Kill 'Em All, but starting really with Ride the Lightning, I think, it's when they're starting to kind of flesh out the songs a little bit more. They're starting to put these intros in, maybe quieter intros, kind of a slow start to the songs before they whip out the guitar and bash you over the head with it. So I found that a lot on Ride the Lightning. Besides those three songs, again, this is pretty good all the way through. I also really love Escape. That's one of my favorites on here. And finally, The Call of Cthulhu. Hopefully I'm saying that right. That's a long one that finishes the album up at the very end. Really, I think pretty close to 9 minutes on Call of Cthulhu, but I like that one a lot too. So there's Ride the Lightning, 1984. Moving on, 1986, Master of Puppets. And this is the final album with Cliff Burton, as I said. And again, definitely a thrash album. So through the first couple here, at least, you're not losing any of that thrash sound. I know that Metallica has evolved over the years. And really, probably if somebody picks up a newer Metallica album, you're not really necessarily thinking thrash anymore. But again, Master of Puppets, still thrash. This is one, in all honesty, for whatever reason, when I was preparing to make this video, it took me a while to get back into this album. And I don't know why. It's not that I dislike it. It's not that it's bad or it's worse than any other ones. But for some reason, as I was listening, it just, this is one that I had to listen to actually a couple of times in a row. And then I popped it in my car and drove around for a while just to kind of get a different perspective on it. And I'm happy to say that for whatever reason, it came back to me. And the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. And again, this is another one of those that I think it builds as the album goes on. Then the next thing you know, you're almost done with it and you're like, wow, that was definitely good. So number one for me on this album, again, and I think I seem to be picking for my favorite song on the album so far, at least these first three albums, are maybe not the top song, the most noticeable song on the album, but for me, number one song on here is Battery. Love it. It's brutal. It's relentless. It's again, it has that kind of slow opening to it, but once it kicks in, it is just so aggressive, and I love that song. Battery, great way to start out the album. Number two for me, we dig a little bit deeper. We go further back in the album to Disposable Heroes. It's another war song. They've done a lot of war soldier type of songs, but that one is definitely lyrically at least all about war, about soldiers. But Disposable Heroes, number two, And for me, number 3 on here is Welcome Home Sanitarium. That's probably where you're starting to get into the more well-known songs on the album, from an outsider anyway. And it's good. It's great. For a lot of reasons, it's great. And, you know, I'd say a lot of people love it, and I can see why. It's got, you know, it's got great lyrics. It's got a great sound. It's got tempo changes. It's really just fantastic. It's kind of haunting, a little bit creepy, a little bit introspective too, I would say. So that's another good one. Rounding out the album here, I also have to say that Damage Inc., again, final song on the album. Some bands will throw on a song at the end just because they needed one more for the album or something like that, and it's not one of the greater songs. But I think I mentioned this in another video, and somebody may have made a comment about finishing an album the right way. Well, in my opinion, Damage Inc. finishes this album in the absolute right way. Great song. And again, just so consistent the whole way through this album. And I don't know if that's just something about the period of time that they were in, mentally, the songwriting, all of that kind of stuff, but super consistent. And, you know, that being said, I think, at least with these next couple of albums here, also, the consistency is just something that runs through. So, Master of Puppets, 1986. Moving on to 1988 and Justice for All. This album is kind of starting to be a move in a slightly different direction for Metallica. And again, at this point, this is the first album without Cliff Burton. So Jason Newsted has jumped in here, and he's taken over the reins at bass. James Hetfield's voice has matured. He's getting older. His voice is getting deeper, and he's learning how to work with it. He's learning how to get more out of it vocally. There's not a bad song. There's not one that I can point out that I say, this one kind of, they just threw it on here to fill the album. Nope. Love it. Love all the songs. So I would almost actually, too, since we're going to talk about the Black Album here to finish up, I would say that this is a bridge. This is a bridge between the first 3 albums and the Black Album. Because you have elements of both. You still have that thrash sound here in some of it, and then you also have some of the slower, heavy, grinding stuff that you're going to see with the next album, with the Black Album. So, a good bridge, and just that combination was just awesome. It was perfect. It was rocking. Top songs here. For me, here's where it's kind of hard to go away from the popularity. One is like a masterpiece. You know, sometimes a band puts out a longer song and it becomes their masterpiece. You've seen it in, you know, Bohemian Rhapsody and Stairway to Heaven and a lot of other great songs, or that longer kind of, you know, opus type of things. Number 2 on this album for me is Harvester of Sorrow. I don't know, there's just something about that chugging, churning riff in here that I really like. But you can't go wrong here. I mean, just going down the list, And Justice for All, Eye of the Beholder, Shortest Straw, Frayed Ends of Sanity, To Live Is to Die, Dyer's Eve. But I'm going to choose Harvester of Sorrow as my second favorite on here, and to finish up the album, my third favorite is Blackened. Starting out the album, the opener. They know how to do openers too. They know how to close an album, they know how to open an album, and they know how to pretty much fill every spot in between. But Blackened, great song, great introduction to the album when you first pop it in and start listening to it. And that's about all I can say about that. Great, 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 great album here. And finally, we transition into the last one I've chosen here. It's the 1991 release, Metallica, self-titled. Some people call it the Black Album. Whatever you want, it's the same thing. So here is almost a full, complete transition, almost, from the early thrash to their new, heavier, churning, chugging, aggressive, loud, but slower tempo type of songs. And some people really hated this. They hated the fact that the sound was changed, and also because it was really commercially successful. This was the beginning of Metallica being kind of a household name, very commercially successful, a lot of radio play. Back when MTV actually played videos, you know, Enter Sandman was all over the place. Unforgiven was all over the place. You know, scoff at me if you will, but I love this album. It's not that I don't love Metallica's thrash stuff, because I do, but this was just a completely different side, and I loved it. I loved this album. I really think it's solid top to bottom. I don't think there's a bad song. There's never a song on here that I skip when I'm listening to it. You know, of course you know the hits, Enter Sandman, Sad But True. What else was here? Nothing Else Matters, The Unforgiven. Those were all, you know, pretty big name songs, and you probably knew these songs. So I will give you my top 3 from this album, which is a little bit more difficult because, again, I feel like all the songs on here are pretty close together. I love Holier Than Thou. That one it was not a hit, not really a well-known song, but it's a little bit faster. It's just super heavy. And I think it showcases all the best parts of this album in terms of the singing and the guitar and the drum and the bass and all of the instruments. So for me, that's number 1. I also really do love Enter Sandman. And again, it was one of those that I actually, back in the day when I used to play guitar a little bit, this was one I learned because it was so much fun to play. But it's, you know, sure it was popular, but it was popular for good reason. It starts out with the acoustic bit, and then it just starts going into the hard stuff. It's, you know, kind of a darker song. For a really popular song, it's pretty dark. And then again, I'm going to dip into the hits. For my 3rd favorite song, I'm going to say that Nothing Else Matters, which is really the first true softer, we'll call it ballad, even though I hate those words. It was really the first of that type of song where it was kind of just low-key pretty much the whole way through for Metallica. But again, Sad But True, Holier Than Thou, Wherever I May Roam, Don't Tread on Me, Of Wolf and Man. I love Of Wolf and Man. That's got, you know, it's kind of a really cool story in there. Reminds me a little bit of werewolf type of stuff. Holier Than Thou, as I mentioned, is kind of almost, if you're going to have a throwback song to the early stuff, the thrash stuff, that one almost creeps onto the list because it sounds more like the earliest stuff, I think, than anything else on this album. So that's Metallica. That's the Black Album, 1991, self-titled. So, kind of my take on the first 5. This first Fast 5 is a first 5 as well. Let that one sink in. Okay, now, what I'm going to always try to do is rank the 5 albums that I've talked about, 1 to 5. And for me, this one is, I don't know, it's kind of easy. This was easier than the others, I think. Number 5, Kill 'Em All. Nothing against Kill 'Em All, but it was raw, it was early, and great stuff on here. But again, I like the way they matured past this. So number 5, Kill 'Em All. For me, number 4, I think, I almost just went chronologically here because that was my first initial reaction. But the more I listened to it, the sleeper here for number 4 was Master of Puppets. And, you know, again, this is the one that didn't grab me initially, that I had to give a couple listens to. And I do really like it, but for me, it was the 4th best album of these. Number 3, Ride the Lightning. And again, just a step away from being chronological, but for me, I like the maturity. I like the way their sound grew throughout it. So number 3, Ride the Lightning. The toughest part was between number 2 and number 1 because I really feel like, and you already know which 2 they are, and Justice for All and Self-Titled. I feel like these are so close. They're not the same musically, but in terms of how I perceive the album, how much I like them, the playability, listenability, all the way through, they're so close. And Man, and even right now, even though I thought I had this figured out, I'm still struggling. So what I think I'm going to do, which is kind of breaking all the rules in the very first Fast Five, I'm going to not give it a tie because, you know, who wants to see that? I'm going to give it a 1A and 1B type of scenario here, okay? So 1A, just by the slimmest of margins, is And Justice for All. My favorite Metallica album, just by the slimmest of margins, and I'm still struggling with this even as I'm saying it. Just because it still does have elements of the earlier stuff that I really like. While, again, it's the bridge. It bridges over into the Black Album, which just barely came in at number 2 or 1B behind And Justice for All. Just to kind of wrap up overall Metallica, the first 5 albums, their sound, I feel, took a different turn after the Black Album, and I don't know if it's because they were trying to keep writing hits at that point, or whether they just creatively wanted to go in a new direction, which is fine. I don't hate when bands do that. That's their choice. Didn't appeal to me as much. I haven't really listened to as much past these first 5. Very deeply introspective stuff here too, I believe, on the albums. It's very dark, of course, but it's not dark in a, dumb way. I don't think there's a better way for me to explain that. It's dark in a very smart way, and I love that. So, there it is, Metallica, Fast 5 Metallica, which ended up being First 5 Metallica, and I'm not opposed to checking in on Metallica past the Black Album. I may give that a shot at some point, or if you have recommendations and you tell me why one of those later albums, Load, Reload, anything past there, should make it to the list, or it's something that I should take another look at and review, please let me know about that. Let me know why. If you love Metallica, please get on and talk some Metallica with me. I would love to talk some more Metallica. That wraps up this. Couple more exciting things happening this week. We are going to do our first ever Funko, Rock Funko. These are rock metal legends in the little Funko Pop guys. I know a lot of people like those. I've never done it before, but I found some really cool ones that I'm going to share with you. We're going to talk about them a little bit, so that's coming up later this week. And also, we are going to talk about 1 or 2 more newer albums, folks that I have just discovered recently thanks to my fellow YouTubers and suggestions. I'm not going to give it away who they are yet, but I can tell you that they are female-fronted bands. And so that's coming up later this week too. So probably this is the first of what I would say are probably going to be 3 videos this week. A really full week, a lot of exciting stuff. So make sure you stay tuned, to do all the stuff, subscribe, like, but most importantly, comment to me. That's my favorite part of all this, is hearing your comments. So thank you again very much for coming by. If this is your first time, thanks for checking me out, and I hope to see everybody again soon.